Imagine being face to face with a countless army, as if they were grains of sand on the beach, and being asked to face it with just a handful of people. This is the story of Gideon, an ordinary man who, with extraordinary faith, led one of the most incredible acts in biblical history. Get ready for a journey full of twists and turns, courage, and above all, the powerful hand of God in action. Stay with us until the end to discover how Gideon overcame the impossible and how this story can transform your life today. It all begins in a dark period in Israel's history. After conquering the Promised Land, God's people went through cycles of obedience and rebellion. When they strayed from the Lord's commandments, they ended up falling into the hands of their enemies. In this context, the Midianites oppressed Israel for 7 years. They plundered the crops, destroyed the fields, and left the Israelites hungry and desolate. The despair was so great that many hid in caves to escape the violence. It is in this scenario that we find Gideon, an ordinary man, trying to grind wheat in a winepress, a place normally used to tread grapes. He was hiding from the Midianites, fearing that they would steal what little he had managed to gather. Gideon was not a warrior or an influential leader. He was just another Israelite trying to survive, but God had other plans for him. While Gideon was working, the angel of the Lord appeared and said, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Judges 6:12. The greeting seemed contradictory. How could Gideon be called brave if he was hidden? He immediately questioned, "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?" Judges 6:13. It was an honest question, expressing the doubts and discouragement that many Israelites felt. However, the Lord did not rebuke Gideon. Instead, he gave him a mission. Go with the strength you have and deliver Israel from the hands of the Midianites. Am I not the one sending you? Judges 6:14. Gideon still hesitated, reminding God that he was from the weakest tribe of Manasseh and the youngest in his father's house. But God responded firmly, "I will be with you, and you will defeat the Midianites as if they were one man." This promise seemed impossible, but Gideon accepted the call, albeit with hesitation. He asked for a sign to make sure it was really God who was speaking to him. Gideon prepared a sacrifice, and the angel touched the offering with his staff, causing fire to rise from the rock and consume everything. This was the first of many signs that God would give Gideon to strengthen his faith. And here, at this point in the story, I want to invite you to reflect. Like Gideon, we often feel small and inadequate in the face of challenges, but God calls us not by our strength, but by His. If this message is already speaking to your heart, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that God uses the weak to confuse the strong. With the call confirmed, Gideon began his mission. He destroyed the altar of Baal in his town, an act of courage that drew both the wrath of the locals and the approval of God. This was the first step in restoring true worship in Israel. Shortly thereafter, the Midianites and their allies gathered for yet another campaign of destruction. It was time to act. Gideon called the men of Israel to fight, and 32,000 responded to the call. But God had other plans. He said to Gideon, "You have too many people for me to hand the Midianites into your hands, lest Israel boast against me, saying that their own strength saved them. Reduce the number of soldiers." So Gideon obeyed. He told the army that those who were afraid could return home, and 22,000 men left, leaving only 10,000. Even so, God still thought the number was too large. He instructed Gideon to take the men to a river and watch them drink the water. Only those who could bring the water to their mouths with their hands were chosen. In the end, only 300 men remained. Consider the situation, from 32,000 to 300. The enemy army was vast, compared to a swarm of locusts, while Gideon now led a small and seemingly inadequate group. But God wanted to make it clear that victory would be his work, not human strategies. How many times do we find ourselves in situations where everything seems lost and the solution seems completely out of our reach? Like Gideon, we are challenged to trust not in our abilities, but in the power and promise of God. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment and share this video with someone special who may feel overwhelmed by life's challenges. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring Bible stories. With only 300 men, Gideon prepared for the confrontation. They were armed with trumpets, clay pitchers, and torches, unconventional tools for battle. But God had given the strategy. They would surround the Midianite camp at night, and, at Gideon's signal, they would break the water jars, blow the trumpets, and shout, "For the Lord and for Gideon." With the plan in mind and trust in God as his greatest resource, Gideon led the 300 men onto the battlefield. The night was dark, and the army of Midian, as numerous as locusts, rested in the valley, sure that no one would dare face them. Gideon divided his men into 3 groups, positioning them around the enemy camp. Each soldier carried a trumpet, a torch hidden inside a pitcher, and above all, the courage to trust in God. At the agreed moment, Gideon gave the signal. The 300 men broke the pitchers, revealing the shining torches, and sounded the trumpets with a boom that echoed across the valley. In unison they shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon!" The deafening sound, the lights dancing in the darkness, and the ferocious scream created an illusion of a much larger army surrounding the Midianites. Fear gripped the camp. Confused and terrified, the Midianite soldiers began attacking each other, thinking they were surrounded by an overwhelming enemy force. The chaos quickly turned into a disorderly stampede. Gideon and his men, without even using swords, watched as the enemy fled in panic. It was an unprecedented victory, a battle won not by human strength, but by the power of God. As the Midianites fled, Gideon called in reinforcements from other tribes of Israel to pursue the survivors and ensure that the threat was completely eliminated. He not only defeated Israel's enemies, but also brought peace to the people who had been oppressed for years. Gideon's victory was a clear testimony that God can accomplish the impossible, using the weak to shame the strong and demonstrate his glory. At this point, I want to ask you, is there something in your life that seems impossible to overcome? Gideon teaches us that even when our resources seem insufficient, God is more than enough. If you believe this story can inspire someone who is facing challenges, please share this video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is a great time to do so. Together, we can spread these messages of faith and hope. After the victory, Gideon was acclaimed by the people. Many wanted to make him king, but he refused. He knew that it was not his strength or strategy that had secured victory, but the hand of God. "The Lord will reign over you," he replied, reaffirming that only God should be exalted in Israel. However, even with this humble stance, Gideon was not perfect. He made mistakes at the end of his life, which had consequences for Israel. It reminds us that even the great heroes of the faith were human and fallible. Still, the story of Gideon is one of the most inspiring in the Bible. It shows us that God does not choose the capable. He empowers the chosen ones. Gideon was an ordinary man, full of doubts and weaknesses, but when he responded to God's call with faith, he was used to perform extraordinary feats. Today, we are invited to ask ourselves, where is God calling us to trust him, even when all seems lost? Perhaps you are facing financial battles, challenges at work, family conflicts, or even internal struggles. Gideon's story encourages us to remember that with God on our side, no battle is too big, no enemy is too strong, and no challenge is impossible to overcome. And for those who feel their faith is small, remember, even Gideon needed several signs to believe in what God was doing. God does not require perfect faith. He just asks that we trust him enough to take the next step. Before we close, I want to invite you again to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment about what you learned from Gideon's story. You can also share this content with someone who needs a reminder of God's power in difficult times. Your interaction helps spread this message to more people. As you reflect on Gideon's story, here are some questions for you to ponder. What areas of your life need to be turned over to God's control? What are you holding on to in fear of failure when God is asking you to trust him? And how can you prepare for life's battles, knowing that victory comes from the Lord? May Gideon's story inspire us to face our struggles with courage and faith. For just as God used 300 men to defeat an immense army, he can transform our weaknesses into strengths and our fears into victories. Keep following our channel for more powerful Bible stories that can transform your life. May God bless you and your battles.